This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
AstraZeneca and Oxford University trial vaccine produces strong immune response in older adults. We look at the hardships facing Ethiopians fleeing from fighting in the country's northern Tigray region. And Asia-Pacific leaders and CEOs of major corporations virtually share ideas on global economic recovery. You're watching Africa Live. A warm welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe, and joining me with a sneak peek of what's to come in business news is Uche.
Thank you, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live this. Tunisia cuts its 2020 budget deficit after parliamentary pressure. And Nigeria lifts its ban on foreign airlines, which were barred in September. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. We begin tonight with the latest on COVID-19 vaccines. The candidate developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University in Britain has produced a strong immune response in older adults. Data from mid-stage trials published in full in the Lancet Medical Journal on Thursday suggests that it could build robust immunity against the coronavirus. People aged over 70 have been said to be at higher risk of serious illness and death from COVID-19. The trials involved a total of 560 healthy volunteers between 18 and above 70 years of age. No serious side effects related to the experimental vaccine were reported. The potential COVID-19 vaccine had been among the frontrunners in global efforts to develop jabs to protect against the novel coronavirus. But other drug makers have in past days edged ahead, releasing data from late-stage COVID-19 vaccine trials that shows more than 90% efficacy. The world appears to be edging closer to a COVID-19 vaccine. China's Sinopharm has given its candidate to tens of thousands of people, saying it's seen no adverse health reactions. And American pharmaceutical giant Pfizer announced its vaccine is 95% effective. CGTN's Jim Spellman has more.
More encouraging news on COVID-19 vaccines coming from the U.S. and China. China has 5 vaccine candidates in phase 3 clinical trials, and we're seeing some promising early data. The vaccine developed by China's Sinopharm has been given to about 100,000 people, and none have shown adverse reactions so far, according to comments made by the company's chairman, who also noted that 56,000 people who have received the vaccine have traveled overseas and none have contracted COVID-19. A study published in British medical journal The Lancet finds another Chinese vaccine candidate to be safe and effective, this one from Sinovac Biotech, though the company has not released complete efficacy data.
The Lancet is a world-renowned scientific journal. The relevant reports published by relevant Chinese companies fully demonstrate the safety and effectiveness of Chinese vaccines.
In the U.S., Pfizer says its vaccine is 95% effective and 94% effective in adults over 65. A particularly vulnerable group. The company will seek emergency use authorization in the coming days. This follows similar findings from Moderna's vaccine candidate. Both companies expect to begin production and distribution by the end of the year.
We can be heartened by the rapid pace of scientific progress, including extremely encouraging data showing a high degree of efficacy for candidate COVID-19 vaccines in large-scale clinical trials. Never has a vaccine been developed in so short a time.
As Americans eagerly wait a vaccine, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved an at-home COVID-19 test. It will cost about $50 and deliver results in about half an hour, but the test is not expected to be in widespread use until early next year. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Bethesda, Maryland.
This single-use test kit could be a game-changer in the detection of the coronavirus. In the US, the nose swab test is available only by prescription. The kits are manufactured by Lucira Health, based in California. The company initially developed it to test the flu, but this year they're using it to test COVID-19 in clinical trials.
What you will find is the test a sample vial, a couple of batteries, a swab, and then the instructions.
The all-in-one test kit involves 3 steps: swab, stir, and detect.
The steps are: take the batteries out of the wrapper, insert it into the device, ensuring the orientation is correct, unwrap the nasal swab, swab each nary 5 times, and then take the swab, dip it into the vial, swirl it around 15 times, take the swab and discard it, close the cap, and then push the whole thing down, which will engage the process of testing. And that gets the test started, and then you'll get a result within 30 minutes.
The US Food and Drug Administration has allowed it for emergency home use. The FDA says the kit can be used by individuals aged 14 and above. That's if the healthcare provider suspects they may have COVID-19.
It is awesome to get more testing capacity through a test like this. It is really awesome also to be able to offer testing that is quick, that you can get the results immediately, and a test that you can offer to patients at home.
The Lucira test is expected to cost around $50. The company says it will not be available nationwide until early March next year. It hopes by June the FDA can amend its emergency use authorization so that people can consult online with doctors who can prescribe the test and ship it directly to patient homes. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Let's revisit our top story. The candidate developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University in Britain has produced a strong immune response in older adults. Data from mid-stage trials published in full in the Lancet Medical Journal on Thursday suggests that it could build robust immunity against the coronavirus. People aged over 70 have been said to be at higher risk of serious illness and death from COVID-19.
The Oxford team is the latest to report favourable progress and, like others, is confirming immune responses in the older age groups, those most at risk from COVID-19. The UK government is well invested with 100 million doses pre-ordered as and when the vaccine becomes ready. With 3 other vaccines, Pfizer BioNTech, Moderna and the Russian Sputnik reporting positive phase 3 trials, wheels are starting to turn.
We are planning for different types of vaccine, and the plans around the delivery mechanisms will be contingent upon the particular vaccine and, of course, the data that comes from the trials and the advice of regulators.
Complicated planning mixed with continued caution and managing expectations.
We need to add vaccination to the existing physical measures, being careful, and hygiene. And if we add that physical distancing and hygiene and care to vaccine, I think we will go a long way to getting rid of this virus.
And selling the vaccination program to a public tired of mixed messages.
People need to be told the truth about what we know and what we do not know, including the possible risks, including stuff that we do not know. So my point is that when we tell the truth, we should also tell the complexity of the truth. No patronizing, flimmy-flammy messages, numbers, colors, little geometrical shapes. Treat people like clever citizens.
The worldwide logistics operation is slowly grinding into gear in anticipation of mass vaccine distribution under specific conditions. The so-called RNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, unlike the Oxford product, require -70-degree storage. But even that's a work in progress.
We are working on formulations which could allow us much better conditions for transportation and storage, and we will update on this in the coming months. I expect that in the second half of 2021 we will have a formulation suitable for transportation without any cold chain to any place on the planet.
And the BioNTech and Moderna products are new technology, genetic codes rather than modified viral samples.
Compared with this sort of laser beam approach of the RNA vaccine, which focuses exactly on what you want, many of the competitors do look a little bit clunky. You could argue that this this data that's coming from the RNA vaccines heralds the new form of vaccine that's going to become predominant going forward.
The science has a long way to go, but in a pandemic, good news is just as tricky as bad. The public now has high expectations of a working vaccine by 2021. Changing course at this stage would be extremely difficult. Andrew Wilson, CGTN, Oxford.
And for more on this, we're joined on phone from London by CGTN's Andrew Wilson. Andrew, this is another welcome development in the race to find an effective COVID-19 vaccine. What are the key initial findings of the AstraZeneca shot?
Well, what's happened with AstraZeneca, they are now in phase 3, the critical phase of testing their vaccine. That involves tests on thousands of patients. But they've just been going through the phase 2 findings, and they've discovered that based on about 560 healthy adult volunteers, that they can conclude that they found a strong immune response in adults in their 60s and 70s, which means they joined the Pfizer product and the Moderna product in saying that they produce a good immune response to the older generation, which of course are the crucial sector of the patient public that are under threat from COVID-19. But what they still have to do is finish their phase 3 trials. That'll take another couple of weeks, and then hopefully they'll be able to declare, as well as Pfizer and America have done in the States, that the vaccine is ready for issuing and final testing.
All right, Andrew, thank you for that. Andrew Wilson on the line from London. To the ongoing conflict in northern Ethiopia, thousands of Ethiopian refugees have arrived in the Sudanese town of Hamdayet on the border with Ethiopia. They are among a burgeoning number of people fleeing unrest in the Tigray region. CGTN's Tulisha Balala has more.
After journeying for days and nights on foot, hundreds of Ethiopians have arrived in Sudan. Many are weak after going without food.
Water is available, but we need food and clothes. We left everything there and carried nothing with us. We also need hospitals. So many people are suffering from diseases, and there are women who are giving birth who need help.
Local Sudanese organizations, in cooperation with the UN and other international aid groups, are providing assistance.
We can see that things are still getting established in terms of the response, the humanitarian response. So it's something that we are monitoring. MSF has set up just today a nutrition screening point at the crossing point so that we can at least observe the people that are coming in and that might have malnutrition. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on and monitoring the situation closely.
To avoid the border town of Hamadait from being congested, the Sudanese Red Crescent is working to transfer some of the refugees to a camp in Gadaref state.
We provide health awareness and counseling for refugees. We also distribute the aid provided by various organizations to the needy.
The UN Refugee Agency says over 27,000 have now fled the Tigray region. Since November 4th, troops loyal to the Tigray People's Liberation Front have been fighting Ethiopia's federal government forces. Tulisha Balala, CGTN.
CGTN's Grim Chala has been following the developments in the Tigray region from the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa.
A few hours back, the Chief of Staff of the Ethiopian Army, General Brian Ojula, briefed the media. He said that the battle in the north has been intensified and several victories have been registered under the name of the Ethiopian National Defense Force. Several strategic locations are being taken away from the TPLF's loyal forces in the north. In all battlefields, he said that victory is being seen and registered at the same time. The general also said that the march to Mekelle has also started. Overnight, there were so many gains made with that mission itself, and the battle for Mekelle is a bit interrupted because of the defense that they have faced from the special force of the Tigray regional state. He said that they've been breaking bridges and also demolishing roads which are taking to that regional state. On the other hand, 76 army generals and also police leaders have been are being chased by the Ethiopian security force as they are accused of treasonous acts on the army and the country itself, and the Ethiopian government asked them to surrender, and they are still expecting the response from those generals to happen. So in general, the war is going on and the army is claiming that it's gaining a lot of victory. The government is saying that it is trying to return the evicted citizens from especially Sudan, where thousands are now flocking into that country in need of shelter and security at the same time due to the conflict going on in the north. And they are saying that the government is ready to provide anything necessary, including protection, security for citizens, especially in the areas they are now controlling. But the problem is now it is impossible in some places to access because of the heavy war going on. The UN is complaining that the Ethiopian government is not cooperating. The Ethiopian government is saying it is doing its level best to protect its citizens from facing sort of death because of the war or also suffering. So what we know so far is that the government is promising to provide protection and also shelter and safety for its citizens, while at the same time the United Nations is saying that access to humanitarian services is still blocked due to also the communications problems. But at the same time, we all understand that people are still suffering. Many more are also crossing borders, continuing to cross borders into Sudan, fearing for their lives because of the war.
You're watching Africa Live. Time for us to take a quick break. Here's what's coming up after the break. Asia-Pacific leaders and CEOs of major corporations virtually share ideas on global economic recovery. And we examine the interconnection of all elements on planet Earth and why we need each other to thrive and remain alive.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt,
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
To Malaysia, which is hosting this year's Asia-Pacific Cooperation meetings. For the first time, the gatherings are being held largely online due to COVID-19. APEC leaders and CEOs of major corporations have been sharing their ideas on the global economic recovery. Ryan Meltzer reports from Kuala Lumpur.
The command center for 25 hours of online APEC CEO dialogues, a marathon brainstorming session at a critical juncture for the region and the world. Chinese President Xi Jinping made the first keynote speech, a clarion call for APEC to stand firm in seeking greater trade and investment liberalization.
Unilateralism, protectionism, and bullying, as well as a backlash against economic globalization, have added to the risks and uncertainties facing the world economy. However, peace and development remain the underlying trend of our times. Meeting challenges through cooperation is the only way forward for us in the international community.
Malaysia's Prime Minister laid out the main theme: reimagining APEC, priorities in the aftermath of the pandemic.
These priorities are free and open trade and investment, regional economic integration, as well as economic and technical cooperation. What has and will continue to evolve will be the need to view these priorities through a pair of COVID-19 lenses.
Welcome. In a dialogue session, Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said that APEC has pretty much stalled over the past 4 years, due largely to the Trump administration's opposition to multilateralism and to its seeing trade as a win-or-lose proposition. He anticipates that will change under the incoming U.S. administration.
I think there will be more multilateralists.
Okay.
I think that they will be more supportive of the WTO
and of APEC. I hope that there will be a more constructive approach, one where countries work together rather than against one another.
The dialogue sessions will continue through Friday, culminating in Friday night's APEC leaders meeting.
US President Donald Trump is still on the tentative list of speakers and attendees for Friday. Some media reports suggest he does intend to take part, although he skipped the last APEC meeting in 2018 and made clear months ago he intended to give this one a miss too. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Kuala Lumpur.
China says it will cooperate with other countries to achieve economic integration in the Asia-Pacific region.
China will work together with other world economies to reduce regional digital divide, fight against pressuring technical enterprises, stay committed to the development of digital economy, and create new ways for economic growth in the Asia-Pacific region.
The Minister also said China will take practical measures to support multilateral trade under the APEC framework. On Sunday, China signed the RCEP Free Trade Agreement that covers 1/3 of the world GDP and population. It's also been positive about joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. The trade deal took effect at the end of 2018 and covers about 13% of the world GDP.
China welcomes any open, inclusive and transparent regional free trade agreement that can help foster economic globalization and regional economic integration. It must, however, adhere to the principles of the World Trade Organization. China will further advance institutional opening up, and we hope that all sides can join hands in liberalizing and facilitating trade and investment to achieve win-win results.
What is biodiversity? What does it actually mean to each and every one of us? Biodiversity is interconnectivity. We're all connected. We are connected to plants, animals, to lakes and rivers, and even to the clouds. We need each other to survive. This is biodiversity, the totality of life as it exists on Earth. Let's take a closer look.
What is biodiversity? What does it actually mean to each and every one of us? Biodiversity is interconnectivity. We are all connected. We are connected to plants, animals, to lakes and rivers, and even to the clouds. This is biodiversity, the totality of life as it exists on Earth. But in the last 3 decades, the human population has increased by more than 50%. We have spread onto what was once wild, virgin land, the endemic habitats of millions of unique plant and animal species. This impact has been disastrous. Lakes and rivers have been polluted and overutilized, and an estimated 1 million plant and animal species are now threatened with extinction. Currently, 33% of amphibians and 20% of mammals are in danger of extinction globally. In Africa, 80% of plant and animal species are in danger of being lost forever, and some have already been wiped out. In 2012, in Cameroon and Chad, the rhino became extinct, while other species like the Grevy's zebra in Kenya are on the verge of becoming a long-forgotten memory. Have we for a second stopped to think about the millions of hectares of natural forest that are being destroyed across the globe? We lose the medicinal value of plants, as well as these having tragic consequences on the world's climate. The United Nations estimates that 36 million square kilometers of land is now desert. As we cut down trees, we cause irregular rainfall patterns, shrinking lakes and rivers, and massive changes in climate. Is anything being done, though, to reverse this trend? To date, 197 countries have signed the Paris Climate Change Agreement, an ambitious global plan to halt climate change. But this is not enough. Factories and cars still pump toxic gases into the atmosphere, increasing the risk of respiratory diseases, especially in our growing cities. The move towards green energy must be ramped up, and we need tougher enforcement of environmental laws. We must reduce our carbon footprint, protect those plants and animal species that are under threat of extinction, and plant millions more trees. Failure to do so means the world will only get sicker as new viruses emerge, hungrier as food becomes increasingly scarce, and thirstier as rivers run dry. Extinction is forever. Once the plant or animal species is gone, that is it. There is no bringing it back. We are keepers of the earth. If we destroy the natural world, we destroy not only ours, but our children's future as well.
To South Africa, where concerns continue to rise about environmental pollution in Cape Town. Worrying levels of E. coli bacteria have been recorded in some of the city's rivers and canals. High levels of E. coli not only make water bodies unfit for recreational activity, but also pose a potential health hazard. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more.
There's a concerning environmental problem on the horizon. High E. coli levels are being recorded in some of Cape Town's waterways. That includes the Milnerton Lagoon, which is a popular inlet commonly used for recreational activity. A team of researchers and water experts embarked on a fact-finding mission to understand the extent of the city's water contamination problem. The results they gathered startled them.
We took 12 samples actually altogether, and in various places along our route. Our route is about 27 kilometers long, and so sampled it probably every 3 or 4 kilometers apart in these various waterways. All of those water samples, barring 2 of them, were all well over the safety limit, as it were, for contact with that water, indicating that that is fairly polluted water.
Those swimming in affected waters risk taking in a pathogen when E. coli levels reach counts of over 1,000. Counts from some of the samples taken by the team reached 2,400, well over the government's limit for recreational water use at 500 counts. Experts say the pollution issue is not confined just to waterways alone. Studies have shown that chemicals present in sewage are also present in marine environments, including in sediment and beach sand, which point to far broader contamination.
Chemicals that we've looked at are compounds that we use in our everyday. For instance, muscle relaxants like diclofenac, antibiotics like sulfamethoxazole, carbamazepine, which is an antiretroviral drug.
The signage may be clear to see, but some people are not heeding the pollution warnings. Many still utilize the water for all types of recreational activities, including collecting fishing bait. Through its Urban Livable Waterways initiative, the city hopes to establish itself as Africa's leading water-sensitive city. But it will have to deal decisively, not just on issues such as E. coli, but some of its root causes. And that includes insufficient sanitation in informal townships, which often lead to pollution in canals, as well as inefficient wastewater treatment plants that are unable to properly process the sewage. The city does, though, plan to spend billions on practical measures to fix the pollution problem.
So the city has developed a number of pollution abatement plans for a number of the river catchments within the city. For example, one particular catchment that has received a lot of attention is the Deep River catchment.
Fortunately, the E. coli issue does not impact Cape Town's drinking water system or supply, but it does underscore just how widespread the problem can become when the pollution is left to spread unabated. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Let's now recap our top stories. The COVID-19 vaccines candidate developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University in Britain has produced a strong immune response in older adults. Data from mid-stage trials published in full in the Lancet Medical Journal on Thursday suggests that it could build robust immunity against the coronavirus. Thousands more Ethiopian refugees have arrived in the Sudanese town of Hamdayet on the border with Ethiopia. They are among a burgeoning number of people fleeing unrest in the Tigray region. The Sudanese Red Crescent is working to transfer some of the refugees in Hamdayet to a camp in Gedaref state. And Malaysia is hosting this year's Asia-Pacific Cooperation meetings. For the first time, the gatherings are being held largely online due to COVID-19. APEC leaders and CEOs of major corporations have been sharing their ideas on the global economic recovery. Let's now catch up with the day's business news, and for that, we cross over to Uche.
Thanks, Peninah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Tunisia cuts its 2020 budget deficit after parliamentary pressure. And Nigeria lifts its ban on foreign airlines, which were barred in September.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in Tunisia. The country has reduced its 2020 budget deficit to 11.4% of GDP. This is after Parliament adopted a supplementary bill slashing the budget deficit from a high of 14%, which was announced earlier this month. Now, the government had come under pressure from the central bank and Parliament to cut its spending amidst the ongoing economic crisis that has seen its earnings plunge due to the COVID-19 pandemic. From Tunis, here is Adnan Shaushi with the details.
The Tunisian Finance, Planning and Development Committee of the House of People's Representatives has approved the draft supplementary finance law for the year 2020. The bill plans additional expenditure of around $8.1 billion, equivalent to $3 billion, that will be obtained by the central bank and the government, compared with around $12 billion previously. Economists, however, warned that the excessive recourse to internal financing will have negative repercussions on economic balances and on the banking sector.
The state needs to control the impacts of excessive recourse to the domestic financing, which will impact macroeconomic stability, in addition to its direct and indirect effects on inflation and the total volume of refinancing. 14 billion dinars is unacceptable. The central bank's subscription to the treasury bonds will exert increased pressure on the liquidity of private banks, and SMEs and businesses will not find liquidity.
The Minister of Economy, Finance and Investment Promotion declared that the government's recourse to domestic funding is not an inflationary measure. Ali Al-Khali added that the state aims to create jobs and boost investment in the country.
Our aim is to encourage investment in many regions by supporting initiatives for launching new projects. The economy is down to unprecedented levels because of the COVID-19 pandemic that has hit all sectors. We'll provide resources to cushion the blow to small and medium-sized enterprises.
A wave of protests has erupted in Tunisia over worsening economic and social crisis. The Secretary General of the Labour Union held a meeting with Prime Minister Hisham Meshishi to discuss the current economic situation and to calm protests.
The social tension is growing in many regions due to the economic crisis. This requires a clear vision by boosting investment and development. The state needs to send a positive message to all citizens nationwide. Tunisians deserve a better economy and a better life.
The National Institute of Statistics recorded a 10% decline in Tunisia's GDP growth at the end of September 2020 compared to the same period in 2019. This decline is associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has impacted all the sectors of the Tunisian economy. The Central Bank of Tunisia has urged the government to implement structural economic and social reforms in order to improve the economic situation. Experts say the state must put in place clear measures to revive economic activity. Abdel Shabashi, CGTN, Tunis.
And moving to Nigeria now, where authorities have lifted a ban on some foreign airlines, allowing them to resume flights to the country. The government had barred 8 airlines from entering the West African nation as it resumed international flight operations in September. Our correspondent, Philly Haza, reports from Nigeria's capital, Abuja.
The airlines granted permission to restart flights to Nigeria include Lufthansa, Air France, KLM, Rwanda Air and Qatar Airways. Nigeria's Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirika, confirmed the development, adding that all the airlines must ensure they adhere strictly to the COVID-19 health protocols. The health guidelines include mask wearing, temperature screening, as well as compulsory coronavirus tests before and after arrival into the country. In March, the government shut all airports across the country as part of measures to halt the spread of COVID-19. It later approved the resumption of domestic flights in July and international flights in the month of September. But after reopening its international airspace, the government barred a number of foreign airlines, which, according to the minister, was in retaliation for similar restrictions placed on Nigerians traveling to the countries where those airlines are based. It is not clear yet if those countries have lifted their ban on flights from Nigeria, but the government says it plans to expand its air traffic by opening its other 3 international airports in the country before the end of the year. At the moment, only Lagos and Abuja international airports are operational. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And in South Africa, a drive to shift the country's electricity production to renewable energy is now threatening as many as 120,000 jobs at its coal mines and power plants that use the fuel. Now, experts say the transition could, in addition, threaten economic activity in 4 municipalities with a combined population of more than 2.3 million people. Well, Angelo Coppola now brings us the story.
There's another broader challenge facing the government as the country moves to meet its climate change obligations. It's about the location of coal reserves and associated value chains.
It's very concentrated in 2 municipalities in Mpumalanga. So you have 2 municipalities, Emalasheni and Gertsibende, which is Steve Trete, which entirely rely on coal really for the activities. So the challenge for us is to be proactive, if you want, in dealing with the problem, because these are jobs that are going to be negatively impacted going forward, and we need to have strategies in place to diversify and rejuvenate Mpumalanga and this region in particular.
The transition from coal to other sources could be an opportunity to create new skills, but there will be job losses.
We don't see everyone who is currently employed in coal moving to renewable energy. It doesn't really make economic sense. But we do need to have other strategies looking at renewable energy. We should do that because we have the grid, there's very good solar irradiation in Mpumalanga, but we also should look at manufacturing, other opportunities in agriculture, tourism, anything else that would contribute.
Analysts suggest that to make the transition will require a concerted effort from all levels of government and other stakeholders.
But also private sector, unions and civil society. And the idea is for even more than 120,000 people to find a job, because these are communities that have high inequality, high unemployment. So we actually would like through the transition to even create more jobs than what there is on the ground.
Analysts say that there's still time to act to stop the potential jobs bloodbath.
The jobs are at risk if we do nothing. They are at risk if we do not act. It's 120,000 people, livelihood of about 2.3 million people who live in this area, which are at risk, yes, if we do nothing out of climate change and the use of coal declining. If we are proactive, and we do what's required to have just transition, then we stand a chance of people employed in those communities and living in those communities to actually be better off through the transition.
For this transition to work, it has to be a just transition for everyone concerned, particularly those people in those communities. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, China's government has been lauded for its efforts in controlling the pandemic and for leading BRICS to support other developing nations. Professor Evans Kalula, who is the chairman of the Committee on Freedom of Association for the International Labour Organization, says that China's policies in globalization were groundbreaking and effective. He also adds that the BRICS summit will encourage cooperation and further strengthen relations.
I think what this BRICS cooperation offers, particularly between the People's Republic of China and South Africa, is a golden opportunity. As I indicated, our President Ramaphosa looks up not only to China but to President Xi in terms of sort of having a complementary outlook towards what they do. And that goes a long way back. I mentioned that, sort of our looking up to China, South Africa's looking up to China, goes back a long way. I mean, South Africa was the first, the People's Republic of China was the first country that joined solidarity with the African people.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, we'll bring you more analysis on a COVID-19 vaccine that has produced a strong immune response in older adults. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, it is back to you, Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. You're watching Africa Live. We've got plenty coming up, including this. How Gabon's only circus troupe is coping with COVID-19 disruptions.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Gabon's capital, Libreville, young circus performers are holding to the hope that their hard work will pay off. But the country's only circus troupe and its only circus school is facing ruin. It has been almost 9 months since a performance was held since the COVID-19 pandemic hit.
In the heart of Gabon's capital, Libreville, lies the Circuit du Okata. It's the only circus troupe and circus school in the African country. It once represented Gabon at the world's biggest circus festivals, but now cannot afford even basic safety equipment. The slump in business started in 2005, members of the group saying.
Nobody calls us. None of the companies can call us because of COVID-19. It's very complicated for the troupe, since this is what we do for a living.
At the circus's home base, the trees carry red signs recalling the glory days. The ground still bounces to the rhythm of the acrobatics, but according to older members, the site is a shadow of its former self. They have been searching for help from private sponsors and the authorities. The Ministry of Culture stopped paying its annual subsidy of $900 in 2009. It could no longer keep up with the demands of a modern circus.
What the different circuses and consorts are asking of us today is a greater preparation and a greater performance. And to be able to achieve that performance, we have to go through training, and to be able to train, we need equipment.
The circus school trains 19 students artists aged from 8 to 14. These aspiring performers come from the local neighborhood. Training is free, as the circus objective is to shape unemployed young people through art. Not everyone makes it through training, but some refuse to give up hope, their shared dream to represent Gabon internationally. Chao Mhono, CGTN.
Elsewhere, the Egyptian Museum has been celebrating its 118th anniversary this week. The museum hosts about 180,000 artifacts from ancient Egypt. Yasser Hakim has more.
The Egyptian Museum in Cairo is a major tourism landmark. Having the largest collection of ancient Egyptian antiquities worldwide, it's a must-see for every visitor to Egypt.
It's the reference for all museums all over the world. It's the reference, and it will remain the reference. This museum will never die, and it will have two competitors, the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization and the Grand Egyptian Museum, but it will stay with the largest collection all over the world.
On the first of several anniversary celebrations to come, guests were invited to the inauguration of two exhibitions. One that includes 50 coffins from the latest discovery in Saqqara, in addition to 15 coffins from the Egyptian Museum itself, but are displayed for the first time. The second exhibition shows antiquities that have been seized from arrested smugglers or repatriated from other countries. A main highlight of the event is the handover of ancient coins from other countries smuggled into Egypt. The Chinese ambassador to Egypt received 31 ancient coins to be returned to its rightful place in China.
I am very honored to be invited here to receive the artifacts in the name of the Chinese government. I also like to thank Egypt for abiding by the agreement signed between China and Egypt in 2010 pertaining to the return of stolen or smuggled artifacts to their country of origin. I would also like to seize the opportunity to thank Dr. Khalid for his efforts to ensure the return of the artifacts.
This is the second time Egypt has delivered ancient coins to China.
I have the pleasure to present the coins on behalf of the Egyptian government. I hope all countries will do the same gesture and hand us our antiquities that have been seized or being sold abroad.
It's been a special celebration and a special few months to come. The 118-year-old museum is to undergo a major overhaul, including setting up an updated high-tech display system. The aim is to remain a major attraction after the inauguration of the Grand Egyptian Museum in 2021. Yes, Hakim for CGTN.